Everybody. Hi everyone. My name is Keris Evans. I'm the president here at Lancaster University Students' Union, and I'm going to be chairing tonight's debate/discussion. So I'm going to let the MPs introduce themselves in a minute, but I'll just run through all the names and parties at the beginning so we've got it all on record. So on my far left, I've got Cat Smith from the Labour Party. I've then got Matt Seven from the Liberal Democrats, and then Jack Lennox from the Green Party. We did invite Nigel Alderson from Reform UK and Peter Gordon Cartridge from the Conservative and Unionist Party, but they're unfortunately unable to attend tonight. So I think we're going to kick off with sort of allowing everyone time to introduce themselves, and then we'll go into some questions. Does anyone want to go first?
I don't mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
yeah. Is it a time limit thing? Or?
Yeah, let's say like 90 seconds.
90 seconds, that's fine, no problems. Hello everyone. Thank you for giving up your evening. I'm Cat Smith, I'm your Labour Party candidate. I have for the last 9 years had the privilege of representing Lancaster and Fleetwood in the House of Commons as the MP. I'm seeking re-election for the new constituency of Lancaster and Wyre. And I'm really glad that the first hustings that we're doing as candidates, or at least 3 out of the 5 of the candidates, is here at Lancaster University. I am someone who is passionate about education. I first came up the drive on the 2A bus to Lancaster University probably about 35 years ago. And for those of you looking at me thinking I'm way too young looking to be an undergraduate then, it's because I actually was one of the preschoolers that my dad had to take with him when he was a student here. And I saw how education and Lancaster University transformed my family's life. And I've seen my dad graduate from Lancaster University, which I'm not sure many people have been to their dad's graduation, but I can honestly say it's one of the most moving things that I've ever done. The power of education is something that the last Labour government realised, which is why we put so much into education and why I'm so pleased that the manifesto that I'm standing on puts so much effort onto early years and education, because I know that that's how we transform lives. If we want change, if we want to build a better country, it has to be done on a foundation of education. So I'm really pleased that the first hustings for Lancaster and Wyre candidates this evening is here at the Lancaster University. Yeah, that's me.
Perfect, brilliantly, perfectly on time actually. Do you want to go next, Matt?
Thank you very much. Hi there. I'm Matt Seven. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for Lancaster and Wyre. I grew up in North Lancashire, went to school in Lancaster at Ripley. That's my link here. And I did go to university in York. Sorry about that. I just want to say, if you see me on my phone during the evening, I'm not scrolling my Instagram reels. I am looking at the Lib Dem manifesto, because I've got a virtual one, not a printed one, but nonetheless just as good, I'm sure. This is my, now 4th general election. I did 2 in Morecambe and Lonsdale, just across the river, and I also stood once in Penrith and the border, just across from where I'm a councillor in Kendal, which is obviously just across the border in Cumbria. I'm standing to speak up for values of investing in the country, standing to speak up for the values of freer trade with Europe and rebuilding our links with our friends on the continent, and really for putting money back into public services, for putting money back into the public realm, getting stuff fixed, and relieving some of the substantial pressures that are causing people to really go under, whether that's the cost of social care, the cost of housing, the cost of energy, red tape causing business costs to be too high. All of those things are really strangling the economy and really hurting us all in the pocket. And I believe that the Dems have some exciting ideas to help relieve some of those costs and kind of unleash a bit of the potential and talent of the country. And that's why I'm really happy to be here at the university. I was really excited when I got chosen to be the candidate for this constituency, because I knew it would mean that I get to do university hustings, at least one. I was kind of hoping for an autumn-winter election and not one with the summer in the air and the Euros on TV, which is definitely a lot more interesting than me, I'm sure. But nevertheless, thank you guys so much for turning out. I'm really looking forward to this evening and looking forward to hear what you guys have to say.
Thank you, Matt. And Jack?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Jack Lennox, and I am the Green Party candidate for Lancaster and Wyre. And I never wanted to be a politician, and I never thought I'd become active in politics. However, I've spent most of my adult life living through our country's steady decline over the last 14 years, and the devastating impacts of so-called austerity. I joined the Green Party in 2015 because they were the only party offering a genuinely different future for our country. an optimistic future where we fund our public services properly, look after the most vulnerable in society, and treat the climate and nature crises with the seriousness they deserve. Because there can be no environmental justice without racial, social, and economic justice. There's a saying that if you don't do politics, politics does you. And my God, have we been done by politics over the past 14 years? Politics in this country is broken. It is dominated by two uninspiring I'll leave it at uninspiring parties who aren't really offering anything exciting. I don't want to get personal on it, but we've obviously had the Conservatives for such a long time, and Labour now are not really offering anything that inspires me. The Green Party has been a party of hope and optimism and vision for decades, but we need to get more Green MPs elected to bring about the urgent change we desperately need now. We can win here, but we need all the support we can get. If you want a country where we stand up for human rights and the rule of international law, a country free of prejudice that allows people to live lives that are authentic to them, a compassionate country that welcomes those who are in need, and a country that will tackle the climate crisis head on, please support the Green Party and vote Green. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jack. Brilliant. So we're going to be going through some of the questions that were pre-submitted today, and then we'll take some questions from the floor after we've done that. So the first question that we have got is your manifesto fully costed? And I'd like to go Matt, Jack, Kat for this order, if that's okay.
Yes. Yes, it is. We've identified some areas where we think that we need a lot more spending. So one of the big headlines you might have seen is that we want to get personal care for people in their own homes free. That's for disabled children, disabled adults, and elderly people. A lot of people are really walloped by care costs. It's kind of lurking out there, hiding in the near distance for some people, and for some people it's here right now already. And of course, it's really iniquitous. It's really unfair. Some people might be paying care costs for years and years and years and years, draining them and their family of their funds. It's really unfair. That's an example of where we think we've got to spend money. And so we get it from a variety of places. We believe in windfall taxes on financial institutions, and energy corporations would raise a serious amount of money. We'd also think things like cracking down on tax avoidance help raise that kind of money. We've identified some key kind of precise changes to capital gains tax and a complicated tax that I personally don't really understand to do with share buybacks. But Joe Biden did it in America and apparently raised a lot of money there. So we thought we'd copy that. I think as well, we've also been honest. Some political parties pretend that you can't borrow. They tell you a lie. They say that the nation has a credit card and you can't run up a credit card bill. Well, we don't have a credit card. Nations can borrow quite extensively, and there's actually nothing wrong with borrowing for capital investment. So that's investment in stuff. Where you go wrong is when, like Liz Truss, you borrow for tax cuts, because that's insane. You reduce your revenue at the same time as you increase your borrowing costs. That's literally the stupidest thing you could do as a politician. But if you borrow, and of course if you borrow for what we call revenue, you borrow for, say, the salaries of people, you can do that, but without boosting growth, that can get quite difficult. We want to borrow in order to boost capital infrastructure. So we think that, get the roofs of hospitals fixed, for example. They can do more operations across the country. Less people are sick. That means more people are working. It means boost higher growth. The other big thing as well is that the Liberal Democrat manifesto sets out that we want to rejoin the single market. I know that maybe for some guys here, Brexit feels like something that happened an incredibly long time ago, and it's now like a fixed point in the political system, but it didn't, and it isn't, and it won't be. We don't want to kind of refight the whole referendum in 2016 or anything, but we do look at the single market, and the fact that we're exiled from that now incurs an extraordinary amount of red tape and costs on businesses trying to export to Europe, especially small businesses, where, if you're only employing 3, 4, 5, 6 people, no one actually has the time in that business to fill out all the customs forms. And we're also seeing extraordinary delays at imports, particularly from the Netherlands at the moment, because of the size of the port in the Netherlands that sends stuff here. But, that problem is spreading. If we were in the single market, we'd actually have very quickly lower business costs, and that means higher growth, and higher growth means higher tax revenue means higher spend on the stuff that we need. So yes, our manifesto adds up.
Thank you, Matt. Jack, do you want to?
Sure, no worries. Sorry. Yes, our manifesto is also fully costed. And I think there's a real point of difference with the Green Party manifesto. We're, I think, the only party really talking about the fact that we're going to need to spend a lot more money because our country's been falling apart for such a long time. And it's sort of like when you invest in a house. You know, if you can't fix the roof, then the problem's going to get bigger and bigger, and it's going to cost more and more money. So we're one of the only parties talking about really raising more money through tax. I agree actually with quite a lot of what Matt said. We are talking about a wealth tax on multimillionaires and billionaires, which is a policy that, for example, Switzerland has had for many years. It raises a lot of money in Switzerland. And there's a group in the UK called the Patriotic Millionaires, and it's a group of multimillionaires and billionaires who are pleading with the government to tax them more than we currently are. We've also got the difference between capital gains tax and income tax. So basically at the moment, money that one earns passively is taxed at a much lower rate than money that you actually work for. And it's quite a strange thing when you think about it, because this is the sort of wealth begetting wealth. You have someone like Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, who's a fabulously wealthy man, and he's charged a marginal tax rate of, well, a real tax rate of about 22% on his huge amounts of money. So there's all these different ways that you can reduce your tax exposure, as they call it. So we think at this election it's very important to be honest with people and talk about how we're going to need to increase taxes. And there are some taxes that would actually hit people that are sort of at a slightly lower level. So we're talking about raising at the moment there's an upper earnings limit on national insurance. So if you earn over £50,000 a year, you don't pay any more national insurance. And we think that's a bit silly. And we think that given our finances are in such a terrible state, we think we should, say you earn £55,000 a year, it's a matter of an extra £5 a week. So I agree with a lot of the things that Matt said about we need to be investing in our economy. We think about the productivity issues that we have in this country. We think about the times you spend with trains going wrong, stuck waiting for buses that don't turn up, all the issues on our roads, all the potholes we've got, cycle lanes not being very good as well, something that upsets me. Everything's crumbling around us. Everything feels broken, and we need to spend money to sort that out. So yeah, exactly what Matt said. Governments, if you have a sovereign currency, as the UK does, we effectively spend money into existence, and there's this whole kind of hysteria around debt and around the idea that we couldn't possibly take on any more. And I think what's really interesting, speaking about the costings of our manifesto, is that it's been analysed by the IFS, and it's been found that even if our manifesto was fully implemented as it is written, and it's a fairly radical manifesto, I would like to say, it will only bring us just above the European average in terms of taxation. So at the moment, we're right at the bottom. We're actually one of the lowest tax societies in Europe. We think, even though you'll hear from the Conservatives where they will be talking about how we've got this, record high rates of tax, but that is relative only to us. It's not, maybe the sorts of nations we want to be more like. So yeah, we can borrow money as well. Germany, for example, have a much higher debt to GDP ratio than we do. So I would say that, yeah, we're costed and it stacks up.
Thanks, Matt. And finally, Kat.
Thank you. I think one of the challenges for this panel is going to be that because the Tory and the Reform candidate aren't here, there might be quite a lot of common ground where we actually find that we agree with each other, which hopefully makes it far more pleasant for you guys watching than some of the TV debates. And the question, of course, is my manifesto fully costed? Yes, it is. And we also have our first steps for change. And the first one of them is about delivering economic stability. Through spending rules, we can grow our economy and keep taxes, inflation and mortgages as low as possible. And I think that really draws out the cost of living crisis that is hitting working people. It's already been mentioned that we have the highest tax burden on working people for 70 years in this country. We don't think that's particularly fair. I'd love it if the Tory had been here, that we could have really challenged him on his thoughts on that matter. But it's really tricky when it's just the three of us on the panel. But I'm conscious that a lot has been said already on this, so I'm going to make my answer really short and say yes, my manifesto, the Labour manifesto, my manifesto is mine as well, I guess, is fully costed. And you can pick up a copy, or you can actually download it off the internet. There's these grey pages at the back where you can see what the change is, what it brings in, and how it goes out, which I think is pretty snazzy. There you go. You can go on the Labour website and read it on a PDF.
Thanks, Kat. I think, as you've sort of alluded to today, because of the sort of type of panel that we've got, I think rather than sort of having each person repeat each thing, maybe we could take more of a sort of like discussion-y type thing approach to the next question, depending on the style of other questions, maybe the future questions as well. But I wanted to get a maths one in as a maths student before everything else. It's something that's really important to a lot of students that we see day to day is the ongoing mental health crisis that's sort of happening for both adults and children in the UK. I must admit, I don't know what's in each of your manifestos on this. So does someone want to start by talking about what your thoughts are on the sort of maybe some of the problems that we see and what your proposed solution is, and then we can take it from there in terms of the differences in approach that may be suggested between the manifestos?
I think the panel would probably, I'm hoping that we all agree that there is actually a mental health crisis amongst young people. I don't think that's in dispute. Excellent, some nodding going on. So we were proposing having mental health worker in every school, every primary school, every secondary school, to try and support young people. And I think it's fair to say, I think the young people have been really hit hard by COVID. Your generation, your education was disrupted, your socialisation was disrupted, and it's the same actually for a lot of younger people. So, you know, as a parent of a small person, I see it, I don't know, Matt, if you see it with your kid, but like there are kids now starting school that do not have the socialisation skills because they've missed out on those early years opportunities as well, which is why it's so important to invest in early years, which is what I mentioned it in the beginning for, which was to say that if it starts going wrong in the first few years of life, it's so much harder to fix. I worked in the social work sector before as an MP, and you know the impact of adverse childhood experiences, the impact of COVID, I think is going to be felt for generations. I think it's a real serious point to say that we can all now agree that mental health is really important, I guess, and say what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, I mean, lockdown sucked, and it was...
What, you weren't invited to the parties?
No, I wasn't invited to the parties. And I was fucking pissed off when I found out about the parties as well. I mean, lockdown was horrible. For me, the second, well, actually it was the third one, the big one in 2021, that was the worst one, because the first one was kind of like, it was new and, you know, new things we cope with. It's the repeat of something horrible that I think human brains find really grim. And so the 2021 lockdown, which actually was longer, that affected me. I think that did a lot of harm to a lot of people. School lockdowns in particular really have harmed a lot of kids. And some of those kids have even paid for it with their lives because abusive parents and caregivers were able to carry out abuse because from a public services point of view, lockdown lasted from about March 2020 to about, in some cases, July 2023, before some services in some areas of the country got back to maybe we should go and see people in person. And so the you can't leave your house without a fine unless you're a Conservative minister period of lockdown ended in April 2021. But because of the risks of the virus, obviously, and the backlog caused by all the problems, a lot of people weren't seen for 3 or 4 years, and that's caused a lot of issues. So Lib Dems would invest a lot of money into GP services so we can get GP services back to how they were. I remember when I was a student 20 years ago, that I needed to see my GP about some stuff, and I could. We had one on campus. I don't know if you guys have a GP surgery on campus, but you have one on campus. I could go see him the day that I wanted to see him. We had a chat about all sorts of stuff. Some of my stuff was physical, some of my stuff was mental, and I felt a lot better by the end of it. And the idea that can be replaced by a phone call or a FaceTime, or even more concerningly, a phone call or a FaceTime with someone who isn't actually a qualified doctor, but is actually a physician associate, that's kind of concerning to me. And so no wonder people's mental health is getting worse. People can't physically access the help that they need. And I think as well, the other thing that we forget, especially when we're talking about young people's mental health, is those external pressures that can cause us to fracture and suffer. And if your family, if your parents or your caregivers have no money because of the cost of housing and the cost of energy, that stress on them is going to be felt by kids. And then you grow up, and if you're the kind of the wrong sort of age where you've been walloped by austerity and then political division and then COVID, and then maybe some of you are sat here or you're feeling that. You've had a lot of years of it just hammering down on you, and there's no end to it, because when has the government turned around and said, oh, we're gonna create more houses? No, they turned around and said, hey, 18-year-olds, who fancies going in the army? Because we want to put you in it. How's that going to help? But I think that's the only time that the Conservatives have mentioned anyone under the age of about 65 this election, is their plan to selectively and randomly imprison some of you guys in an army camp for 12 months and make the rest of you do a weekend of volunteering, like mandatory volunteering. Compulsory volunteering. That's not a sensible policy, but that's symptomatic actually of a country that's grown to hate its young people, if we can get kind of spiritual and philosophical. This country has become a hostile environment for young people. I feel it. I'm in my 30s. I'm a dad. I feel it targeted towards me, that I'm told I'm too young, let alone how I'm told how kids, my kid and other kids should be quiet, get out of the way, don't park there, don't walk there, don't play there, don't do that, don't say that, don't think that, don't speak that. All the time, constant. I go knocking on doors as a counsellor. Loads of my residents are absolutely lovely people, but sometimes some people just can't wait to express how angry they are with young people for the very crime of existing. That is a toxic environment, and we've built that up year and year. I would say since the Brexit referendum created the need for a new enemy, and the Conservatives decided that new enemy was young people with all their different ways. And so no wonder people are feeling the pressure, they're feeling the harm, and it hasn't stopped, and the division and the stress hasn't stopped. And so part of it, as I will say a lot tonight, nothing gets better without money being spent on it. That's part of it. But there's also a more fundamental part of it, which is that we need to really reassess the way that the British state and the British media talk about young people, and maybe take the pressure off people's necks and allow them to live. Thank you.
And what are the Green Party going to do about that, Jack?
Yeah, Matt's covered a lot of ground now.
Sorry.
No, it's great. We've expanded, beyond. Yeah, I mean, coming back to the initial point about mental health. Yeah, I mean, we have a complete. What was the question?
It was. What are your plans to tackle the ongoing mental health crisis among both adults and children in the UK?
Yeah. I completely get it. I have a mental health condition myself. I have ADHD, and I've more recently discovered I'm probably also autistic. So it's very exciting times. But I've agreed with what was being said about lockdowns, and it was for me part of what sort of drove me to get a diagnosis was I think the impact, the symptoms, as it were like exacerbated by the lockdowns. And I had a lot going on in my life as well, but it was, I sort of started to realise that I definitely did struggle in ways that other people didn't seem to with certain things in my life. And, I obviously during the pandemic, we're still kind of in the pandemic, but during the lockdowns, like just absolutely impossible to see a GP. And when you have ADHD, you're not the most organised necessarily. So I was organising these like phone appointments that were 3 weeks, in the future. And I'm pretty sure on each occasion it wasn't me who had made the mistake, but never managed to get to see my GP. Ended up actually having to pay to go private to get a diagnosis. And the whole thing since then has been an absolute nightmare. Even trying to get, you'd pay thousands of pounds to go private sometimes for some things, but then getting back into the NHS is really, really difficult. And I am now finally back in the NHS. So you get referred back in once you've gone through the whole process. There's so many other problems facing. I know that people with anxiety, so medication, sorry, is where I was going to go. We've had all these problems as well. We might come on to Brexit, and we've talked a bit about it already. But we're having all sorts of problems getting all sorts of medicines now into the country. So another thing, another issue when we look at mental health is the fact that we can't even treat the conditions that we know about because we can't get the medicines in, we're not producing them, we're getting really bad deals. As I understand it, they aren't really having the same shortages in most of the other European Union countries, but also those countries have rather unkindly formed a bit of a cartel to stop us getting anything, which that's not... we shouldn't be punished necessarily, but I guess there's the things our government has been doing in the past few years. You don't really blame the European Union for treating us in not such a great way. I completely agree with what Kat said. So it's the same. We've got the same policy actually in our manifesto about having trained counsellors in all schools and in sixth form colleges as well. To help people with mental health issues. I'm a Lancaster City councillor, and the problems we're having talking about our economy and everything else, we've got a record number of people on long-term sick leave at the moment. Some of those things are physical, but a lot of that's also mental health. It's depression, stress, burnout. Yeah, and I think, I would say that some of it is also just the nature of the society that we live in. I think we are, we've had all the issues of the way that social media has taken off, the kind of intensification. We were actually kind of talking about it before we came out today, like the way that an MP's job has changed, the life is, the lifestyle and everything, the pressure. It's a different thing. In some ways, it's always been difficult. I'm sure being a politician, if we had someone here from the 1970s, they wouldn't be saying that it was easy. But yeah, there's the intrusion we now get. The people, the bullying that you see online. So many different aspects to it. And on the sort of coming to mental health care itself, it is actually the same problem we're seeing in lots of other health issues as well. So my mother was recently diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and my girlfriend has Crohn's. And a lot of what I've been talking about is actually exactly the same. It's not unique to mental health. But I think one thing we have seen is that mental health has not had the same treatment as physical health. And so something that the Green Party have been talking about for a long time is getting mental health on a par with physical health. And I believe the government has technically now kind of done that, but it's that sort of thing like when they introduced a living wage and they just rebranded minimum wage. Living wage didn't make it a living wage. So, I think we are still a long way off. But at the very core of it, we don't fund our healthcare system properly. And we are, coming back to what I was saying a bit earlier, our spend on healthcare is again one of the lowest in Europe. So we are on about 9% of our GDP goes towards the NHS. And you see much higher rates of spending in almost every other country. We're one of the lowest spenders, I think in the world, but certainly among OECD countries that that have the kind of healthcare system we've got. So we do need. There are other things. I think there's other ways that the NHS needs to be fixed. But maybe the very last thing, the most sort of obvious problem with all of this is that when I was trying to get back into the NHS system with my ADHD diagnosis and with the medication that I have, the Lancaster medical practice that some of you may be signed up with as your doctors, they outsource this to a different company. So there's a mental health provider, and that's a sort of branded company. And the company that they were using was rubbish. And so they cancelled that contract and they found a new one. And in the process of all of this, the people who are relying on these services cannot get access to them. And that's that. You now see that private part of our healthcare system is one step away. Like when I was your age, you didn't come across companies yourself in the NHS. You didn't get referred from your GP to Virgin Healthcare, and then they completely let you down, and then you could leave a 1-star review on Google Maps, and what changes, who knows? But it's really this creeping privatization that we've seen is now really starting to bite, and it means that where there is where money is being generated within our healthcare system, it's being paid out to shareholders, and I think it's so important that we. If I was going to slightly criticise the Labour platform, Wes Streeting is talking about how we need to use the private sector to help fix the NHS, and I just think that's like inviting the fox to sort out the chicken coop and help sort things out. I mean, well, he'll clean it up if you invite a fox into a chicken coop, but it's maybe not what you want. Anyway, yeah.
So can I come in on that?
And please, sorry.
I mean, I had an experience. A long time ago under the last Labour government. So I was on a very long NHS waiting list because, I won't go into the details, but I was not going to be seen on the NHS for a very long time, and it was impacting on my education because I was obviously a child at this point. And actually, in order to cut waiting lists, using the private sector to clear the backlog actually meant that I got seen faster and managed to get the condition corrected, which then meant I could go back into education and learn. So I think using the private sector to clear backlogs is a sensible way forward. But the reason we've got to this situation, frankly, is because of the Tories, and I know they're not here to defend themselves, so I don't know how far you want me to go, but I do think the Tories just do not stand up for our NHS. They run it down and get us into a situation where when Labour comes in, the inheritance is always an NHS that's on its knees, and it's very much the case now. So I think using and taking advantage of the private sector to, help, children be able to have health conditions corrected so they can access their education is, it's not ideal, I get that, but I think it's that the outcome is definitely where we'd probably all want to be.
Can I come back ever so very quickly on that? I think that the big problem with it is that, and the thing I experienced is that the private sector is the public sector. So the person that I saw for my ADHD assessment is an NHS consultant psychiatrist. So they split their time between the two things. And I think there are certain types of healthcare where there is some capacity, but they're basically this capacity we allegedly have at the private part. If you put everyone from the NHS into it, then you're just back into exactly the same problem, because in so many in so many examples, like my mum's the same one, that the neurologist that she saw was an NHS neurologist. So I think there's a false dawn in the idea that we can do this, because you're going to, you pay to skip the waiting list to go into the private part of that person's schedule. If we fill that person's schedule with all the other people, then it's just, we're never going to get anywhere with it. And then I think there are so many other terrible things with inviting more business into healthcare.
Have the Lib Dems got anything on privatisation of the NHS?
I think
you're against it.
it's one of those easy things you can say, isn't it? Yeah, we don't like that. But I think we want to put more money into it. So I mentioned the GPs. We want to recruit 8,000 more GPs. We want to guarantee access to NHS dentists. So there's a part of privatisation that we just have all accepted is just normal. So dentistry is basically almost completely privatised in the country, and that service has just stopped working as an NHS service. So we would put a lot of money into dentistry. We put a lot of money into mental health services in schools. We'd put money into cancer treatments, and we'd also invest money in public health. That's one of the other sort of forgotten elements of it, is each council has a director of public health in charge of things to try and boost the lifespan and the comfort in life of people. We'd put money back into those budgets as well. But yeah, to talk about focusing on privatisation, boosting NHS dentistry is a massive part of the Lib Dem platform. And to circle back to what I said earlier, like a good politician, you've got to repeat the things that you've got in your head until everyone's bored of hearing them. Free personal care. Well, the care system is completely privatised. I mean, okay, so councils have a sort of state, have their own care agencies in some places, and some of them have their own care homes. But effectively, most of the provision in both homes and in people's houses and care homes is all private companies. And some of those private companies do a great job, some of them don't. Some of them pay their workers well, many of them don't. Some of them make huge profits, some of them don't. And those with these huge profits, you have to wonder how much of that money would really be better off being invested into the system, or the wages, or the training, or hiring more people. So if you remove the profit element, like we're doing with our proposals on free personal care, you remove those kind of people who want to make money out of the sector. Also, a personal little bugbear of mine, it's not health, but it is privatisation. I absolutely hate the way that children's homes are privatised. Councils spend an absolute fortune on placements for children who need placements for all sorts of reasons. Those children need looking after. But the cost of those placements is extraordinary. But that isn't because the placements are amazing or the providers are amazing. That's the worst part, is the costs have gone up, but the provider quality has gone down in so many places. I absolutely hate that. I can't think of any good or decent reason why we should allow... I was driving down here, right? And on the news, the first item on the 6 o'clock news on BBC Radio 4, because I'm at the age now where I listen to BBC Radio 4, the first item was that a school in Wirral that was only been open 3 years has just been shut down because its staff were a grim and vicious collection of sadists and paedophiles, and allegedly, and the school's just been sit down. That school earned, from Wirral Council alone, £2.2 million in profit in just under 3 years. So there's a part of privatisation that we can get rid of. The privatisation of looking after children has to end, and the state should take back control of that.
I'd agree on that, actually. And on dentistry, because I did overhear somebody, I was out campaigning a few days ago, going, well, I don't really think it's that bad around here. It absolutely is. So my first ever advice surgery as a Member of Parliament in 2015, this is going back some time now, and it hasn't got any better. There was a man who came, and he'd booked his appointment, and all I had was that it was a healthcare issue. And so he comes in, and he's got a carrier bag with him, and he sits down opposite me in the library and pulls out the carrier bag and then reaches in, and I think you know what's coming. So he pulled out his teeth that he'd pulled out himself because he couldn't get access to dentistry he could afford. And that will stay with me forever. But I think that has been what's certainly motivated me to ask, I think, 3 Prime Minister's questions about dentistry in my 9 years as an MP, because I don't know how you guys would have reacted in that situation, but I was speechless. Like, I didn't know what the right thing to say to someone
Well,
who's...
had he just pulled them out? Like,
It looked like the blood looked like it dried on. Sorry, it's a bit
that
graphic.
worse?
I don't know if it's better or worse, but he'd also put them in a little margarine tub as well, because there was more than one of them. And he's like, I now need dentures, and I can't afford dentures. And I thought, well, this guy now is struggling to eat properly. He's obviously struggling to have the confidence to go and socialise. His mental health was impacted. I don't think we can underestimate how important dentistry is. So I just think we should all be talking about dentistry all the time, because it's one of my favourite things to talk about. But it's not my favourite thing to remember that moment. That's the stuff of nightmares.
yeah.
But can we not live in the medieval times and pull our teeth out ourselves? Can we have that access to dentistry? It doesn't seem like we're asking for the earth, does it? I don't know.
Yeah,
Everyone else in agreement? We're not asking for the earth. We're just asking for dentists.
As much as it sounds like you'd like to talk about dentistry all evening.
Oh, sorry. I don't think that was even the question, Caris. I'm sorry. We digress.
We'd like to take a question from the floor, or I suppose the stands. Has anyone got a question that they'd like to ask, ideally to the whole panel? That has never happened to me during one of these events before. Is it a general one? Ideally, yeah. We've got a
Dentistry only.
We've got a roving mic if you can, just for the stream.
Oh, no one told me it was being streamed. Oh, no.
Yeah, you swore earlier. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It's
I'm
all right,
sorry about that.
I
It's a
did
family
frantically
show.
check. Do I need to apologise for that? We're not live on the radio.
Right.
I wasn't. Oh, is it working? Yeah. I wasn't here for the start, so you might have talked about it. Have you talked about sewage and water yet?
Not yet. Let's talk
What
about
do
it.
you think about that? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it should be a basic bare minimum that a first world country should be capable of not having sewage in its water? Please tell me what you do about it.
I think we'd all agree, wouldn't we?
I think it's a real shame that I used up my one allotted swear before the question about shit in the river. Oh, because, I mean, it's outrageous. It is outrageous, though. And actually, it's got worse because it's got from the beaches losing their their flag status, becoming unhealthy to swim in, to the rivers and the lakes becoming severely polluted, to now we had 2 outbreaks of cryptosporidium in 2 different parts of the UK. So it used to be, didn't it? If you went abroad, there's some countries where they always say the countries are lovely, you have a great time, whatever, but drink bottled water because their water isn't as the tap water isn't as looked after in the same way as British tap water. That's what I was always told, and I faithfully had my water bottles when I went just about everywhere. And I can't believe that Britain is now one of those countries where if people come here, they're probably being told now by their travel agents from America or whatever, or make sure you don't drink the water out the taps in Britain anymore because they can't keep it clean. And that comes back to that extraordinary theft of capital from the water industry by the hedge funds that kind of own the debt that the water industry is into. I mean, at least one of the water firms is functionally bankrupt.
Yeah.
And so it's paying a huge amount of debt. Of course, they're not paying it. We're paying the debt.
Oh, yeah, your bill's going up, by the
Yeah,
way.
our bills go up, but the services go
Yeah.
down. That's something that I think we can recognise a lot of what's wrong with Britain. Our bills go up and the service goes down. But I think the water is a bang-on specific example of a system built in the 1980s by Margaret Thatcher that has got worse and worse over time and then suddenly has got very badly very quickly, and now people are actually being poisoned by the water in their taps in their own homes in certain areas of the country. I'm not saying it's everywhere, but it's obvious. Those are like warning sirens. It's going to keep getting worse. So it comes back to, and the Lib Dems, I think, want to actually nationalise the water industry over time because we want to stop that capital flight abroad. And I think we were the first. Jack will say the Greens were the first, but I think the Lib Dems were the first party to really start really highlighting
Yeah, I've been going around Lancaster with a petition on this for years.
Ed Davey took a dunk fully
Well,
into Windermere just to prove, just to make a point
Has he
about
been
the
healthy
water.
since, or has he got ill?
I don't know. It probably would help the case if he had got ill. I don't think he had got ill.
He
But
didn't swallow.
he's a tough guy. He's a tough guy. But it's a great example of something that's gone really quite fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
Something that we really desperately need to fix, and something that actually, if we did fix it, which would involve a lot of money being spent to upgrade the pipe network
It's
and
our
stuff. That would actually,
system.
but the fixing of it would boost the economy in 2 ways. Firstly, tourism would go up because our beaches are clean, and secondly, the actual people involved in the construction of the new plants and new pipes there goes my pen.
He feels very strongly about
Yeah,
this.
that economic activity boosts the economy generally. So yeah, it's a big one, and thank you for asking it.
Can I talk just about Ofwat? Because I broadly agree with Matt there. But Ofwat is meant to be the regulator. What an absolutely toothless regulator it is. So I sit on the Environment Committee in the House of Commons Select Committee world, and I have the pleasure regularly of getting bosses from Ofwat and water companies, including Thames Water. They're good fun. I'm not on their Christmas card list. I get them before me, and my goodness, it's like the people circulate. They go from like working for Thames Water to working for Ofwat to working for United Utilities or Yorkshire. And I'm like, this is an absolute cartel, like an absolute joke. So I just think that Ofwat, like the idea of a regulator is meant to be to regulate. It's all the same people. It's a joke, and they don't regulate anything. They just go, oh, don't do that again. Oh, you pumped sewage out. Oh, how naughty, don't do that again. Like, it's pathetic, absolutely pathetic.
Absolutely,
so, I agree with Matt on that. And, also reservoirs. I'll hand over to Jack, because he's not said anything on this yet, and I'm sure he's got... I think you're finding that we're all in agreement, so Jack can finish off for us on sewage.
Well, although the Labour Party aren't saying renationalise the water companies, which I think we need to.
No, but I think it's about making sure that when it comes to public... services, that when you can't shop around, that seems to me totally dumb. Like, we are all customers of United Utilities, right? Can you switch water companies? No, you can't. So it's not even proper privatisation.
No, exactly, like the trains.
It's an absolute nonsense.
Zombie capitalism.
I mean, my views on this I've been at many select committee meetings, so I'm gonna be quiet for a little bit.
I'm really glad Kat brought up Ofwat, because there's so many different aspects to the problem, and I think Matt's covered quite a few of them. I think, we've had, I think it's £50 billion of shareholder dividends have been paid out since the water companies were privatised, and all of that money could have been invested in sorting out our sewage systems. Some of the sewage systems that we're still operating on are Victorian, and they were very cleverly built back. The Victorians were anticipating a system that would need to last for a very long time. And we, my God, have we not had that kind of vision with the maintenance that we've been doing. And so it's, what the Green Party, we want to see shareholder dividends completely suspended while companies are pumping sewage out, which is almost all of them. And there's been this idea that we can't afford to renationalise the water companies. It's kind of interesting how something like Thames Water is just probably going to be renationalised now, because it's, as we've already said, it's in such a state that it needs to be taken back over. So a lot of the kind of the core of this, I think, for me, I don't mean to keep banging on about this, but it comes back to the same austerity agenda. And you see, actually, with the regulators, you see the same problems with other regulators, like the Environment Agency. And what you see at the Environment Agency is that they've lost loads of staff over the years. There's been wage compression. There's been all of the other problems that we've seen elsewhere in our economy. And we've seen these bodies just getting less and less powerful, less and less able to do anything, more and more kind of cowed, and politicised in some ways as well. And certainly with something like Ofcom, I'm kind of going completely off piece now from sewage, but you have the same problem. Like, they don't, the toothlessness of Ofcom in the face of something like GB News, which just breaks all of the rules all the time, and you have two Conservative MPs interviewing a Conservative Prime Minister on a news show, and then GB News claim that they're not actually a news channel, even though they're called GB News. Because of the way they do their format, and that's how they then get around it. And Ofcom go, no, okay, that does make sense. Yeah, GB News isn't a news channel, so it's even though it pitches itself as a rolling news channel, it's really infuriating. And so I think we for us to resolve these problems, we need to be investing in those state instruments properly, so that something like Ofwat, it can actually.
Can I
punish? Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, Jack's got slightly distracted by another type of sewage polluting the airways rather than the waterways. To kind of wrestle it back on the point, and seriously, one of the things that is also making it worse is that as soon as you try and build any infrastructure in Britain, people immediately start protesting against it. So there are plans to build reservoirs. Those plans, I can't remember which reservoir it is, you have to forgive me, but it's like a 10-year programme to build a huge reservoir somewhere in the Midlands. A full 3 to 4 years of that is just the planning process. Think of the extraordinary amount of cost that is adding to the importance of building clean water. There's proposals for super sewers in cities. Jack mentioned the Victorian infrastructure. That's what made me think about it. Because the Victorians, when they wanted to build stuff, they built stuff In Britain, we want to build something in a decade, and we have a 9-10 year long planning process for major infrastructure projects before we get around to building it, by which time, of course, it costs far too much, it takes far too long, it usually falls short of what it wants to do. So we really have to fundamentally change the way we do stuff. There's no point saying, we need better regulators, and we do, yeah, but we also need to make it fundamentally cheaper for those companies to take the action that we want them to take. We've got to make it cheaper to basically dig a big hole in the ground and put a sewer in, or a reservoir, or build a new water treatment plant. You need to make those kind of things cheaper, quicker, faster, easier to do. You have to allow the planning system to streamline major infrastructure. You can't allow a few people to hold up a project that will benefit thousands or hundreds of thousands of people for years and years and years because it's their hobby horse. That's what's happening too often in Britain. So we mentioned Victorian infrastructure. Why is it that so much of our country is based on Victorian infrastructure? It's because when they needed to build something, they built it. We have to recapture some of that energy.
Brilliant. If I may, we're going to move to a round of directed questions. So I've got a question for each of you. They're all quite different topics that have come from students about sort of some of the things that they maybe don't like so much about each of your manifestos, if I may. So if I can, Jack, I've got here, the Green Party manifesto states that you will levy a tax of up to £585 on people who fly more than once per year. Wouldn't this policy just deprive ordinary people of enjoying cheap holidays abroad while the rich can simply pay their way out?
Well, it's an interesting criticism. It's actually in the Lib Dem manifesto as well. I was quite happy to discover, so I'll be interested to see Matt's answer on it.
Frantically looking.
I think it's exactly the same, but there's the frequent flyer levy. I mean, the fact of the matter is that it's actually a very, very small percentage of people in this country who take the vast majority of the flights. I've actually forgotten the exact. It's about 10% take something like 70% of the flights, or something like that. Someone can correct me if they're Googling. But we have an absurd imbalance. And about half the country don't fly at all year to year. So about half of us, we're never on planes. So if you are the sort of person who's taking multiple trips abroad, then I do think it's reasonable with the impact of that, that there should be a cost, because there's a huge environmental cost. And frustratingly, there's so many different ways in which this cost is not accounted for. So jet fuel, as you might know, has no duty on it whatsoever. And this is part of a big international agreement. It's kind of it's almost a bit of a conspiracy, really, that makes it very difficult for any individual country to try to actually change it. So you have this kind of, this agreement that we're just... And this is why you see all these crazy examples of people who are able to fly, from Newcastle to Amsterdam and then back into London or something, less than they would have had to, spend to take the train down. And again, because it cuts across so many different ways where, because things aren't joined up here, we're not able to take money out of something like flying and then invest it into our actual infrastructure, which is something that you see countries like France now doing, where they've made it illegal, where you can't have flights where there's a train alternative that takes less than 3 hours. I think there's definitely a slight... the whole time I've been in the Green Party, flying is one of these difficult things, because you do have people, you have split families, you have people... Caroline Lucas, our MP, had a son living in America, and she used to get it in the Daily Mail every time she went to see him, or when he came back. Because, some people have to fly, and that's okay, that's all right. But I can tell you from the industry that I used to work in, and some of the industries we then worked with, you have quite a lot of people who will be making 3, 4, 5 flights a week. And we need to do something to stop that. And so you can criticise maybe that having more than one flight is a bit too low. I would maybe be happy to have a discussion with someone on that. But I think we need something more ambitious in trying to tackle the issue. And the fundamental point here that I haven't actually said is that obviously, I'm guessing we hopefully all know, flying is absolutely terrible for the environment. My brother is a pilot, by the way, so we have good arguments about this. But it's one of the most devastating things as an individual that we are able to do. I don't totally believe in this whole idea that your own carbon footprint is what it's all about. I think that as Greens, we don't really think that's the right way of thinking about it, because you can be someone living in a cave with a really low carbon footprint. But is that changing anything? No. We need to be changing policy. We need to be changing how we operate. But I do think it's defendable to have a frequent flyer tax, fundamentally.
Jack kindly tagged in the Lib Dems, and I've just checked, and I'm delighted to say that Lib Dems don't define someone doing something frequently as once. So if you're taking 1 or 2 international flights a year, Lib Dems actually want to make it cheaper for you to do that, which I think is quite an exciting idea. But speaking of somebody else, I haven't been on a plane for a few years. I think that's cracking. But how will we do that? Well, we'd shift the taxation so that, turns out apparently, first class air tickets are VAT free. Well, we put VAT on that. We'd also introduce a new tax on private jets as well. We would... basically, we want to make it cheaper to international fly for normal people who do 1 or 2 a year. And we want to crack down on those short-term domestic flights where there's a rail option of 2.5 hours. Within 2.5 hours, obviously some people always have to fly if you're going from Aberdeen to Bristol or whatever. But if there's a rail option of 2.5 hours or less, we want to basically make it impossible for you to get a plane because you've got to get a train, or because we also want the train network to work properly.
There is a train from Aberdeen to Bristol.
Yeah, well,
we
got, yeah. But the point is that the Greens want to make flying more expensive for everyone. We want to make flying for you and me a bit cheaper, but flying for, billionaires a lot more expensive. But yeah, I don't think this was direct question, not debating. Sorry, he mentioned me, so I took the opportunity. But go on, you can throw your directed question.
Well, I'll
at
let
me.
you rest your voice for a minute, and I'll ask
fair
Kat
enough.
her question, if I may. It's a short one for you, Kat. Why won't the Labour Party mention Brexit?
Well, we do mention Brexit in our manifesto, and it's about accepting the fact that, we had the referendum. And I think actually going back to the referendum, it strikes me that I'm someone who campaigned for Remain, by the way. So I was out, I did door knocking in Lancaster, I did street stalls in Lancaster, I wore through the shoe leather, kind of, pushing leaflets through doors. I was passionately, for Remain, and we lost that referendum. And I remember, maybe it was 1 or 2 days later in Market Square, and someone said to me, Kat, I'm devastated. I'm absolutely gutted. I can't believe that Leave won. And I was like, I know, me too, I'm feeling pretty gutted right now. I've put in a lot of effort. I know you don't win them all, but it feels like a really big one to lose. And then they were like, yeah, honestly, if I'd known it was going to be so close, I'd have voted. And at that point, I think it kind of really brought home to me is that sometimes the narrative in the media because it was the narrative in the media, if the panel remembers, I'm sure some of the audience were too young to remember, was that Remain had it in the bag, that Leave was, they do all right, they get 40-something% of the vote, but Remain had it in the bag. So a lot of people who would have voted Remain then didn't vote because they thought it was in the bag. And I think that's an important lesson in politics generally, that as politicians we should always be aware of, which is that just because the media narrative is that something's going to happen doesn't mean to say it's going to happen, and until the votes are cast, until the polls have closed, you never actually know the result of anything. But yeah, to answer the question more directly, to answer the question more directly, I don't think anyone voted to Leave because they wanted to see something like divergence on chemical standards. And Rachel Reeves has been out in the media today saying, well, we do want to have more alignment with the EU on things like that, because that wasn't actually what the referendum was all about. So Europe remains our biggest trading partner. It's important to have a strong relationship. And in many ways, it sucks, but yes, it is about making Brexit work, because we have left. And the idea that we can ever return on the same terms is not going to happen. And I still to this day remain quite upset by the result of the referendum, but I am someone who believes in democracy, and as I believe that we should respect the result of that referendum in the same way that I will respect the result of this general election. If this general election returns Rishi Sunak to Downing Street, I will respect the fact that he got elected fair and square Prime Minister, if that's what happens, if that's what people vote for. So there you go.
Apologies for the question misreferencing your manifesto. Matt, I'll just read the question. How can the Liberal Democrats justify their betrayal of students by supporting a massive increase in tuition fees under the Conservative coalition government after an explicitly promising to oppose any such hikes? How, as a young voter, can we trust you as a political party?
Yeah.
I know you were hoping this wouldn't shut in.
I didn't support it at the time. I think if you make a promise, you should stick to it. And I'm sorry that Nick Clegg didn't feel that. But he's far away now. He lives in California and works for Facebook. He's nothing to do with me or my values. what the Lib Dems are planning to do in the future. It's important to note, getting into the subject, that in Scotland, where it's free, there is also a cap on the number of Scottish students that can go to university, because no one's paying anything towards it. So some Scottish students who would like to go to university are forced to go to university in England because they can't get a place in Scotland. Conversely, that means that some Scottish universities have too many places because they've hit the funding limits from the Scottish government, and therefore English students go to Scotland and take what is effectively supposed to be Scottish spaces. So how you pay for stuff is always one of those kind of complex things. I think that the error was obviously in promising, but we can't just sit there and say, right, we don't know how university is going to be funded anymore. We have a university funding scheme. Universities expect and depend on that money. They use the fact that some courses cost less than the fees that they charge to subsidise the fact that other courses cost more. So that's kind of an important business principle. But if we're talking about the university sector, which is massively important and has grown hugely in the country over the last 30, 40 years, only 50 odd years ago, a very small percentage of people went to university, and also, as far as the media and government were concerned, there was only 2 universities that counted. Now, a great many more people are able to go to university. The places in England aren't rationed. There's a huge amount of choice, a huge amount of courses, a huge amount of different places to go. The universities employ a huge amount of people. They add a great amount of value. And the other thing that's worth mentioning is that universities are an enormous export of the country. So we get loads and loads of people coming from other countries to study in this country. They often pay much larger fees than British students pay. Those fees, of course, are subsidising everyone else's, and they're subsidising the university. They're also, of course, whilst they're here, hopefully enjoying their time here and spending money in other ways to boost the economy outside of the campus. And hopefully also, if they decide to return to the countries where they're from, as opposed to settling here permanently, they're more than welcome. I'm all for immigration, more than welcome for people to come here and settle here. But if they do decide to return to their own countries, they're taking back those kind of nebulous ideas of British values as well, which is good for us in the future. So the university sector is being hammered by this government, and it is really, really struggling. And several universities are really very close to bankruptcy because of the uncertainty that's been introduced around, firstly, international students, and now to talk of threatening that some courses will be assessed by some sort of civil servant process, or alternatively Swiller Braverman sitting in a room and going, I don't think that students in Bradford should do performing arts anymore, strike that one off the list. It's like a Soviet control system about how people want to study and how they want to spend their time and spend their money and learn. Education is a good thing. Universities are a good thing. We need more of them. We need more students. Ultimately, the system that we have means that we're able to keep doing that, even though always getting the bill is annoying. It is at least enabling universities to keep growing and keep expanding. And if we're talking about university funding, we need to really push back against the Tories' attempt to stop university from recruiting international students, because if the Tories win that argument, whether they're in power or not, if the Conservatives win the argument that international students should be something that shouldn't be allowed to be happening, then you will see universities in this country close, full stop, and you'll see other universities unable to deliver the amount of courses that they deliver, full stop. And that would leave a lot of people out of work and our already battered GDP even more battered. I don't want to see that happen.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to come back out to the floor in case anyone has discovered a question in their brain. Yeah?
Yeah, I was just going to say back on...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, I just sort of on the same point again with the universities. I mean, I'm just wondering what the panel is going to do about the university funding crisis, because I mean, I know certainly I mean, I'm a PhD student and have found that getting funding has become harder and harder. I mean, being out of Horizon hasn't helped.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've heard names of universities which they reckon could go to the wall in September. So there's clearly a crisis coming on, and what are the parties going to do to address that? Because simply, if a university goes under, there's a whole load of students studying there. How are they going to be dealt with? I think it's a serious problem which isn't being talked about enough. So what are the parties going to do to fix the university funding crisis and make it sustainable in a way which doesn't make it so expensive for students that they're denied that education?
Kat, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the Labour Party, we've been very clear in our manifesto that the current funding settlement doesn't work for taxpayers, it doesn't work for institutions, it doesn't work for staff, it doesn't work for students, and that it is utterly broken. And I think many universities find themselves in a situation where, because home student fees are fixed, that they then have to recruit more international students because of the fees in order to make their budgets balanced. But then you've also got a government at the moment who seems dead set on trying to stop international students coming over because they want to be able to put on a billboard that they've lowered immigration, when actually by saying to international students you can't bring dependents, then that's actually means that we're less competitive in a global market, because higher education is, we compete globally for the best and the brightest. So what we've said we'll do is to work with universities to try and resolve this issue, and that is going to involve being creative and working with not just higher education but actually education more broadly, looking at our FE colleges, looking at our apprenticeship routes and seeing if there's more ways that we can integrate and work together, because the kind of competitive nature that universities are all competing against each other doesn't always bring out the best, does it? And actually we've got fantastic educational opportunities in this area alone. So I think about, Lancaster and Wyre College, I think about Myerscough College, which is an agricultural college just down the road. Like, actually there's probably quite a lot of crossover and collaboration that does happen, and Lancaster University has evidence, and I recognise it has done some of this, but that doesn't happen everywhere. And actually, we need to be looking at how education can transform lives. How do you grow the economy? Well, you grow the economy by making sure everyone can realise their educational potential and isn't shut out because of an inability to pay or fear of debt and things like that as well. So for me, that is a very important principle. And I said at the beginning, I'm passionate about education. I'm also a graduate of Lancaster University, so I always want to see Lancaster do well. And I'm always really proud when I see, things like, Lancaster beat York at Roses, and I have said that just because Matt sat next to me.
I'd be lying if I said I kept up with it since.
Oh, sore loser.
Jack, how about you?
Yeah, so I completely agree with the question. The universities are in an absolutely terrible state, and one of the things that actually drew me to the Green Party in 2015 was its policy on higher education. So I feel so sad for the situation that you lot have been landed with, because it was pretty bad when I was at university. It was £9,000 a year with the. In fact, I was on the £3,000 a year before it went up to 9, and I think the way that we've seen the sort of the sort of marketization of higher education has just been really, really sad. It also as well as the damage it's doing to the universities, it kind of creates this really sort of warped view of universities around like what's the degree that's going to make you earn the most money when you come out, and that's not what education is about. That's not how we should be thinking of ourselves, and it's a real sort of Americanization of our system that I think has been really, really terrible. So the Green Party is for completely abolishing tuition fees and fully funding every student, and in the immediate situation that would be basically an enormous bailout for universities. It's not to say that there aren't loads of other problems, and there certainly are. Like there are issues with the way that some universities operate, and there are issues around sort of. I think they've been forced into this because they're having to look at how they can make them as much money as possible. And so the university, I was at Royal Holloway, University of London, if anyone knows it, that found it had to massively invest in its management department at the expense, and it tried to close down the classics department, where I had studied, even though it was a top 10 department, but it didn't make them enough money. Management was making them a lot of money. Royal Holloway wasn't good at management, but it was a way of them getting these very rich guys, mostly from China, that were coming over to the UK and paying extortionate fees, getting a not very good degree, probably at the end of the day. I maybe would get in trouble for saying that, but that back in China, it's a London school that does business, and so it works. You know, it goes in the CV, and it's what they were after. So that only lasts so long, you know, because London Business School is a different thing, and I think over time people will start to realise, oh, wait a minute, this isn't the London School of Economics, or, you know, this isn't somewhere. This is Royal Holloway. Do they do this? The other thing that obviously you've seen universities trying to do is become conference centres and trying to sort of turn themselves into businesses in so many other ways. And so you're seeing them pull themselves in all different directions. Lots of universities, obviously, they're not conference centres. They're not experts in doing that sort of thing. Some of them obviously have got very, very good at it because that's how they make most of their money. That's what happened at Royal Holloway as well. So the majority of the money was actually coming in over the summer with all the conferences and the weddings and everything else. And so I got a really nice student. My first digs was I had a double bed, dimmer switches, and ensuite bathroom. It was ridiculous. But that was the student lodgings because that's where things were going, because they had all these TVs that they kept in a cupboard, and then they got them out when it became a travel lodge, basically, over the summer. So yeah, we need to properly fund them. It's going to be a huge amount of money, and we want to bring back maintenance grants as well, because I think you look at what our parents' generation would have gone through with university. It was just such a different experience for them, and it was free. They could pick whatever they wanted to study, and through that you get into all these different interesting sort of things. You see so many people from the generation above us, their lives went on these very interesting paths because they started studying German and they tried to do something else, and then and they had that open to them. And I think lifelong learning as well, like actually creating a greater sense of universities playing a bigger role within communities and being used by the communities more for education, for retraining. There's so many different purposes that we can bring them in. But I think where we are right now is just a total disaster.
I suppose I've said a lot about universities in the answer to my earlier question. Other than to say, I agree with you, we don't actually know what happens if university goes bankrupt because that's not happened before. I really don't want to have to find that out in September, where that would leave people there in their courses. Where would it leave people who graduated from there if they needed to get their transcript of their degree for further education or something? I don't know. It's really serious. I'm sorry about the uncertainty it's creating for you as well in your career. The Lib Dems would absolutely, we would get back into Erasmus. We would make sure that we continue to re-participate in Horizon. We left for a bit, we've come back in, is that right? So we want to obviously make sure we don't leave again. And to deepen, our whole thing is about deepening collaboration with Europe. We want to see people under 35, we want to strike a deal so they can have free movement again, to make it easier for people to work and study and live in different places. So we want to tie our economy to Europe's more closely. We feel that that's causing a lot of disruption. We want to give universities the security of knowing that research will be properly funded by the government. And I think that's something that we'd also back as well. And also, let's be clear, making money is like a good thing. It's not a bad thing if an institution makes money. That's a good thing. Economic activity generates tax revenue, generates the funding for the state. So we shouldn't be like, there's a marketplace for education. This is a bad thing. This is a good thing. It makes universities compete. If universities didn't compete, if they just had one university per county in England and you just got sent there, then you wouldn't get the competition for the best students or the best lecturers. So we shouldn't allow ourselves to be we shouldn't talk ourselves into a situation where we want mediocrity because that makes us feel better somehow because there's less competition, or we shouldn't allow ourselves to start thinking that education is education is really important, but the idea that some things have a moral purity that other things don't, or that because I've studied X at my university, it makes me a better person. We should allow all sorts of people to go to all sorts of universities and study all sorts of things, and we should have as many universities as possible competing for all those people, both here and abroad, so that we can generate as much money as possible to pay for all the other things, but also so that we can change people's direction in life by offering them opportunities to study things that they didn't realize they could study, and they go off in different crazy tangents and do unusual things. That's a good thing, and that comes from energy, and that comes from activity, it comes from competition, it comes from people winning and losing places. If we statify and static everything and stick it down in aspic and say you can't compete, you can't you can't borrow or you can't expand, and you're not allowed to hire faculty from other places, and you can't compete for those students, and those people can't come here. We're adding all these extra rules that are stopping people from competing. Those are bad things. We right now, as a country, need to generate quite urgently more money. We absolutely have to, so that we can pay for all the important things that we all want to see. And we are sat here as a country not generating anything like enough money. We're not generating anything like enough tax revenue. We are mining the inheritance that the Victorians left us of all the cash, which they made in bad ways. But nevertheless, there was quite a large cash pile and quite a large infrastructure construction pile, if you will. We've mined that, if you can get my kind of analogy. We're mining it away. We're not replenishing it. We're not replacing it, anything like the speed at which we're taking it out. There are other countries like Argentina that are grim spectres in our future. Countries that took their eye off the ball, relaxed, got lazy, stopped pushing, stopped competing, stopped trying to make things better, allowed everything to slow down, and they've paid for it with collapses of their economy. Though I've been to places like Argentina, it's a lovely place, lovely people, all of that. It still haunts me because everything is tired and collapsed and people are exhausted because they don't understand how their country went from being the richest country in the world to one of the most troubled economically in the developed world. That kind of stuff is our future if we don't crack on and generate more economic activity and revenue. Universities are so crucial to that. And we can't pretend that, it's 0 BC and we're all here to sit around in togas debating, angels on a pinhead. Universities have a massive role to play in educating and expanding people's horizons so they can get better jobs, so they can pay more tax money, so that we can invest in schools or make personal care free or replenish thousands of weapons that we've given to Ukraine. Pick a thing, right? Pick a thing that the British government does or spends money on. Does it need to get better? Yes. Is there enough money being spent on it? No. Where does the money come from? How annoyed are you by your trains being late? How annoyed are you by 999 calls going unanswered if you're suffering with antisocial behaviour or you've got ill health in your ambulance? It's very irritating. It's more than irritating. It's extremely dangerous. Those problems have become normalised in countries like Argentina that fail. I don't want us to fail, so I don't want us to become a static, slow country burdened by regulation. I want us to be freed to compete and succeed and grow our economy. That's why universities matter.
Can I just chip in with something that I thought of ages ago, but Matt's had his Skittles, so we've gone away from it. I think leaving Horizon and Erasmus was really stupid. I don't think anybody those that did vote for Brexit, I don't think were really voting because they were the things that were, winding them up. But I think what really galls me is when you've got an education secretary tweeting about how great it is that she has secured the UK's entry into Horizon. And I'm thinking, yeah, but the reason we weren't in it was because of you in the first place. And I know that politicians are not the most popular people. I get that. And we're all competing to get a job where you're less popular than insert your own profession now before I offend anyone. But when people do that, when they say, oh, isn't it amazing how we've achieved this, when actually they're just undoing the mess they made in the first place, I think it actually does down all politicians, because I do believe that everyone on this panel is standing because they do believe that the world can be better than it is now. Candidates in elections are volunteers. We are here because we want to, and we're willing to put ourselves out there. And democracy is so fragile and so precious. So I'm really glad that you guys are here today, but I would really encourage everyone in this room to go and speak to friends, family, and encourage them to vote. The deadline to register to vote is coming up. Tomorrow. And the deadline for a postal vote, I think, is Wednesday. The day after tomorrow.
No, that's tomorrow.
It's all very, very soon, right? Okay. I'm sure you guys are all registered, but there's probably someone you know who isn't. And so, in an outbreak of unity on the panel, I think we would all say, please register to vote and use your vote, because when young people's votes aren't cast, some politicians, none of us, but some politicians say that's because young people don't care, and I do believe that young people care. So whoever you vote for, please go and use your vote. It is incredibly important, and democracy is so fragile.
You're all automatically registered.
Yes, unless you opted out.
Oh, unless you opted out. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
And you probably need to update your address, because when you were automatically registered, it was probably at the college.
I should have said that, sorry. Yeah.
But thank you, Jack. So I want to get 2 questions in like 10 minutes. So I'm going to ask for really quick answers, okay? So the first question is on policing and drugs. Now, I will ask the original question, which I have completely lost. So okay. Will any of you pledge to increase policing and crack down on stopping drug use in this constituency? So we see a varied range of views on this kind of thing at the university, and I'd be really interested in hearing your views on policing and drug use. Oh God, I have to pick an order. Matt, you've not got first in a while.
Oh no.
Quick.
Yes, I want to increase policing, but I want it to be targeted against people doing crimes and not against people having possession. Does that make sense? There's a lot of children who are being used in county lines. So, if we're talking about drugs, then the money should go into arresting the vile criminals who operate gangs of children, where the children are coerced, abused, even tortured if they don't sell enough money. It happens in this country. It happens in the sort of supply line over in the Netherlands and further over to South America. It's like a chain of misery built upon exploitation. That's where the policing effort should go into. And if we're talking about policing, it means that I can talk about something which annoys me, which is the court system, where in 10 seconds, thousands of court cases every single day are dropped because either the prosecutor hasn't turned up, or the defense barrister wasn't available, or the courtroom has literally fallen down. That happens all the time. It's causing enormous weight, and victims are waiting years and years and years for justice, and witnesses are waiting years and years before they can give their evidence. All of that needs to change. We need to spend more money on that so that people who do crimes actually go to jail.
Thank you, Matt. Kat, do you want to go second? You got 90 seconds.
Okay, so that's
are these
right.
still on? Oh, they are. Sorry, ignore me.
Sorry. So following on from that, yes, more people need to see justice, and not in any way more so, frankly, than violence against women and girls. I mean, the reality is that things like rape prosecution rates have just nosedived and plummeted in this country under the Tories. We've seen cuts to neighbourhood policing. We've seen cuts to public health budgets, which, bear with me, obviously do link in, because when we're talking about illegal drug use, actually quite a lot of the work that was being done by public health before austerity cuts kicked in was around people beating substance addiction. We do not pay enough attention, frankly, in this country to the issue of alcohol addiction. Alcohol is so freely available, and if you live with addiction, it's so hard to avoid. But the cuts to public health budgets mean that people find it really hard to access help. I think that's something that's really important, something close to my heart. I'm ashamed that Lancaster has the highest drugs for alcohol-related deaths than any other council in the country, are based on stats that were out a couple of months ago. And it's something that I've pledged that I want to work on, particularly focus on in the next parliament should I be re-elected, because I don't think that losing lives to alcohol is acceptable. I don't think that children should be going out without parents, because parents have died because of alcohol abuse. So all of that, I think, ties into justice and policing.
You're
About
very
90 seconds.
good on time, Kat,
I know, I've done this
must say.
before. It's not my first rodeo.
And Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to sort of take the question as it was asked and sort of push back on it. It's got this sense of, we're going to crack down and sort these problems out. And I think that the reality of this is that, if you look at a country like America, the war on drugs has completely failed. And if you look at countries where it's about ramping up the rhetoric and about sort of militarizing the police to smash the drugs gangs and everything else, it just makes things worse and worse and worse. And so actually at the core of the question about drugs, for example, the Green Party has quite an unusual position, probably, that we actually stand for the decriminalising of drugs. And this isn't about just making them available so when you go to the supermarket you can buy a bag of heroin. What it's about is treating drug use as a public health issue, which Kat did allude to as well. Because that's really where the problems lie. And it's a step separated. We can just try and attack people because they're taking drugs and because they're dealing drugs. But there are normally much bigger problems in their lives. And as Kat alluded to, when you talk about something like alcoholism, it's tied into all these other issues that we're looking at. And it does make me laugh. If we had a Conservative candidate here, one thing that's just so frustrating is that through cutting all of the services that we've been talking about this evening, I'll wind this all the way back to the question right at the start. You look at an issue like mental health. I have served on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of the Lancaster City Council, and I was absolutely astonished when we had the police in to talk about the issues that the police were facing, was that because all the other services have gone, the police are now the last resort. They are the buck stops with them in so many problems. And an unbelievable amount of the police time now is spent on people with serious mental health conditions who are not getting picked up anywhere else. And they gave an example of 2 police officers who had to pick up a person in Morecambe. I've got to go. And they had to drive this person to Kent to get them to a mental health facility that had vacancies. And so you've lost 2 days of police time. It's astonishing. And yes, that's awful.
Thank you. Apologies for cutting you off there. Fantastic. So we're going to wrap up with a question. So this is your chance to wrap up in general, but I think it is an important question to ask. And that is the question of the majority of people, it seems, have lost faith in or do not trust the government to work in their interests. Personally, how are you going to earn and ensure the trust of your constituents? And I'll give you each another 90 seconds. Who's not gone first recently? Kat, you've not gone first recently.
I spoke first on the last question.
Did you?
I think it's my turn.
Oh, sorry. Jack.
It
Sorry.
should be.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's a really good question, and it's really difficult. I think our system is broken, as I've said, and it's something I find really sad when I have had a couple of doors slammed in my face over the past couple of weeks where people say, well, you're all the same, and I don't have time to say, but if I wanted a career in politics, I wouldn't have joined the Green Party, because there aren't many careers going in the Green Party. And so I think there's a lot we need to do. I think the thing I try to do is I try to be very honest. I try to, we get told off by our central party for spending too much time actually answering questions and not getting to the messages that you want to get across and bridging to something else. But I think trying to be really honest with people. I do think that the part of the problem we face is that our system is fundamentally one that doesn't work. It's an adversarial system. It involves shouting at each other across a room. The whole way the chamber is set up in the House of Commons. It's this. And if I can tie into it, the democracy. I'm conscious of the time. We need proportional representation. We need a different way of voting that actually makes people's votes count. Because we've all been living through 14 years now of probably voting for not getting anything that we actually want. With a proportional system, we wouldn't have had all of these decades of Conservative governments. I know that 90% of Labour members want it, but Keir Starmer doesn't, so it's not happening. We desperately need it, and it's going to be a very big challenge because we need to get the turkeys to vote for Christmas.
But under time, Jack. Well
Thank
done.
you. Oh, okay.
Just barely. Matt, could I come to you second, please?
Certainly. Let me put my stopwatch on. Right. So I think that people say, oh, politics is broken, what's gone wrong in politics? I think what's gone wrong is that the sausage-making machine of policy has had all the policies put into the sausage-making machine, but there's no sausages come out the end. So, since 2016, Parliament has passed innumerable laws. They've done innumerable things. They've left Europe. They've instituted lockdowns. They've done all sorts of things. They've signed treaties. They've broken treaties. They've said thousands of words about deporting, a small number of innocent people to a third country or whatever else it is that they've talked about. They haven't actually achieved anything. The policy to thing happening sort of machine, which actually for a large part of this country's history actually kind of motored along fairly well in governments both popular and unpopular, has completely broken down. And so what the Lib Dems want to do is try and shake up the system. Part of that, through voting reform so that we can get a more representative parliament. But part of it is just trying to think about things in a different way and stop trying to use politics as a way of trying to control people and start using it as a way that can actually deliver outcomes so that we can get lots of houses built, we can get more railway lines built, we can make things cheaper. And all of that is the policy outcomes. We've tipped all these sausage ingredients into the sausage machine. No one's tried to turn it on yet. Let's try and turn it on.
Thank you, Matt.
I can't follow that.
Well, you will have to. So.
Wow. Okay. So this turkey has actually presented a bill for proportional representation in the House of Commons to respond to the issue. I mean, we absolutely do need democratic reform in this country. I see this. In the last Parliament, I was chair of the Petitions Committee, which was the mechanism by which the members of the public can start an e-petition on the Parliament website. And in terms of scheduling those for debate, that was time in Parliament where we actually got to talk about the things that members of the public wanted us to talk about. And it was a breath of fresh air, because I think that is so important that we can do that. And on occasion, I have broken my party's whip to vote for something that I believe in and something I feel strongly about. And I think ultimately it needs politicians to stop the chaos of the last 14 years, to let the grown-ups back in the room, to bring about real change. And when candidates sit before you in hustings like this, for us to say, do you know what, I will keep my promises, and if I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it. And actually, politicians, regardless of which constituency they represent and which party they represent, they are elected by the people in that constituency, and politicians and your MPs should work for you and not for any political party.
Thank you, Kat. I will close off today by reminding everyone that the deadline to register to vote is midnight tomorrow. So please do encourage your friends to register. Think about it as a several-stage battle. You can fight for them to register by tomorrow, and then you can fight for them to actually get to the polls when you get to the voting day. And the deadline to apply for a postal vote is 5 p.m. on Wednesday. So if you want to get involved in that, that is your deadline. Thank you so much to all of the candidates that have made it here today. I will just finish by reminding you of all of the people who you can vote for come July, and that is, I'll do it in alphabetical surname, she says. So we have Nigel Alderson for Reform UK, Peter Gordon Cartridge for the Conservative and Unionist Party, Jack Lennox for the Green Party, Matt Seven for the Liberal Democrats, and Kat Smith for the Labour Party. Apologies for my alphabetisation poorness. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us in the room and online.
Thank you for chairing. That was
Thank you.
brilliant.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
We're going to exit through that door.